The air inside the alien ship felt strange, almost too clean, too quiet. Commander Valona stood tall, her silver armor shining under the white lights. She was beautiful in a cold way, with smooth, violet skin, glowing eyes, and no smile on her. Lips to her people, emotions were a weakness. Mating was a science, a duty, a function, no more, no less. But today, she was curious. She had chosen a human for observation. His name was Jackson. A simple soldier from Earth, with strong arms, kind eyes, and a small scar under his chin. He stood on the docking ramp, his hands raised in peace. He had heard about this invitation, a chance to represent humans in a cultural study. He didn't expect much. Maybe some questions, maybe a scan or two. He did not expect her. Valina looked at him like a machine inspecting a new tool. "You are the subject," she said without emotion. Jackson raised a brow and smiled. "You can call me Jackson." She blinked once, slowly. "Names are not required." "Well," Jackson shrugged. "I like names." She noted that. Curious creature, she thought, already wasting time on small talk. She turned and led him into her lab. He followed, looking around at the walls, the bright panels, the strange floating lights. Everything looked cold, clean, and lifeless, just like her. "Why was I chosen?" Jackson asked as they reached the center chamber. Valona tapped a screen, her voice flat. "Your biological data matches standard compatibility." "With our kind?" "Oh," Jackson said. "So, this is a breeding test." She nodded. "Our species requires strong genetic mixing for survival." Jackson rubbed the back of his neck. "Right?" Ty was told this was cultural exchange too. She paused. "Yes. You may ask questions." Jackson looked at her directly. "Do you want this?" Valina tilted her head, confused. "Want is irrelevant. My duty is to complete the pairing sequence." He laughed, not mocking her, just surprised. "So no dinner first, huh?" She blinked again. Why would food be involved in mating? Jackson grinned. Never mind. The experiment had begun, but not the way she expected. He didn't touch her, didn't try anything. Instead, he asked her about her world, her childhood, her people's customs. Valona gave short, scientific answers, but slowly. Something odd started happening. She didn't want him to leave the lab just yet. She didn't understand why. At one point, Jackson leaned closer to look at a screen, and his hand brushed hers. It was only for a second. But she felt heat warmth, not physical, something else, something internal. She stared at her hand afterward, as if it had betrayed her. Jackson didn't notice. Or maybe he did and stayed quiet. He simply said, "Your skin feels like moonlight." Valana's breath caught for a second. No one had said such things to her before, not even her bonded males from past sequences. She didn't reply. She only logged it. Subject uses poetic comparison. Skin equals moonlight. Unknown emotional effect. Will monitor outside the chamber. Unknown to both of them. A quiet alarm activated. A watching officer from Valona's command center noticed the change in her brain readings. Emotion detected. The file was flagged. Back in the chamber, Jackson looked around. "You know, this place could use some color." "Color?" Valina asked. "Yeah," he said. "Something warm. Maybe art? Music? Something alive." She stared at him again. "Longer this time. Your people feel too much," she whispered. "And yours?" Jackson asked softly. "Maybe you haven't felt enough." Those words echoed inside her head. Even after he left for the day, she sat alone in the lab, staring at the data. But thinking of his smile, she opened a secret file on her tablet. Title: New Study, Human Intimacy versus Alien Efficiency. Under it, she typed slowly. "Today, I felt something strange. The subject did not touch, but reached me somehow." Then, for the first time in her long, sterile life, She did something forbidden among her kind. She placed a small flower on her desk. A gift Jackson had left behind. She didn't know why she kept it, but she did. And she smiled just a little. Valina sat at her work desk, staring at the tiny flower. It was now pressed inside a small glass cube, a gift from Jackson. She had scanned it, studied its biology, and found it useless. But still, she kept it. Why? She didn't know, and that unsettled her. Her fingers hovered over her datapad. She wanted to type a new log entry, but nothing came. Her mind, usually sharp and clean like a blade, now felt heavy and clouded, and the face that kept appearing. In that cloud was Jackson's. She had called for him again. He arrived with his usual easy smile and tired soldier's jacket. His boots echoed on the smooth alien floor as he entered her lab. Still cold in here, he joked, rubbing his arms. Valina blinked slowly. Temperature is optimal, he chuckled, not talking about the air. She tilted her head again, studying him. How do you define warmth? She asked. Jackson scratched his chin, thinking, warmth is when someone cares, when a room feels like someone lives in it, not just exists. Valina frowned. Caring is not efficient. It's not supposed to be, he replied. It's supposed to be real. That word, real, echoed inside her like a strange vibration. Do you believe I am not real? She asked suddenly. Jackson looked surprised, then serious. I believe you've been told not to be real, he said softly. That answer made her quiet for a long time. Instead of taking samples or running mating tests, she simply asked him questions that day. Do humans feel? Always. Yes, he said. Sometimes too much, does it not? Weaken your logic. Sometimes, he nodded, but it also makes life worth it. Valina recorded the words, but more importantly, she recorded the way they made her feel. Something soft was happening inside her. Not physical, not part of the experiment. But it changed how she looked at him, and how she looked at herself later. She walked Jackson through the learning corridor, a glass hallway that showed scenes of her people's achievements, war victories, scientific labs, children being trained in emotion suppression. Jackson stopped in front of a still image, a young alien girl being taught how to override her feelings. He frowned. She looks sad. She is not. Valina replied. That is? Control. Jackson shook his head. No kid should have that face. Valina didn't argue. She simply stared at the image too. And for the first time, it didn't look like control to her. It looked like silence. Heavy, lonely silence. Back in her chamber, Jackson pulled out a small music player. He put one earpiece in her ear, one in his own. Try this, he said. A soft human song began, slow piano, gentle voice, words she didn't fully understand, but the melody wrapped around her chest like a warm blanket. Her eyes closed without permission, and for the first time, she let the sound move her. Not in function, but in feeling. When the song ended, she opened her eyes slowly. She was staring at him now, not as a subject, but as someone. He wasn't touching her. He hadn't made any move, but something inside her shifted. As if he had touched her without hands, she whispered, I don't understand this feeling. Jackson smiled kindly. That's the first step. Later that night, Valina didn't log her data in her normal system. She wrote it on an old pad with a stylus like humans did. She didn't want her superiors to see. She titled it, The First Touch Wasn't Physical. Then she wrote, He gave me music. He gave me silence, but not the kind we are trained for. His silence made me feel seen. My fingers didn't touch him, but I think he found me anyway. What she didn't know was that one of her assistants had accessed the corridor's surveillance footage and had already sent a report to High Command. Commander Valona has breached emotional threshold levels. Contact with human male must be re-evaluated. Recommend cultural isolation or cleansing. But Valona didn't know this. not yet. She stood in her room with the music still playing in her mind. She touched her chest where her heart was and whispered something alien to her own ears. I want. Valona stared at the human screen in front of her. It glowed with color-soft faces. People laughing, crying, kissing. She had found a file in Jackson's gift box, marked Human Classics. Inside were hundreds of old Earth romance dramas. She watched one, then another. Hours passed. And her duties were forgotten. Her fingers hovered over her chest again. Something stirred inside her. Something not part of the experiment. Why did these human stories make her heart race? Why did the soft words, the long looks, the simple touches feel more powerful than any weapon she'd studied? She stood up suddenly, breathing heavy. This was wrong against protocol. Against logic, but she couldn't stop. She needed answers. That day, she called Jackson again. He came quickly, carrying a small bag of Earth snacks and a crooked smile. You miss me already? He joked. Valona didn't smile, but her eyes did something different, softer. Slower. I need to ask a question, she said. Her voice lower than before. Shoot, Jackson said. Sitting on the couch inside her private chamber, she sat across from him and leaned slightly forward. What is kissing? Jackson blinked, his mouth opening in surprise. Well, he said slowly, it's when two people press their lips together, usually to show care, love, or sometimes just attraction. Do all humans do it? Ost? He nodded. It's a big part of showing how we feel. Valona nodded and looked away. I watched your human dramas, she said. They kiss when they cry, when they laugh, when they say goodbye. Why do your people use it in such emotional moments? Jackson took a breath. Because when words fail, touch speaks. Kissing is more than skin, it's connection. Valona stared at his lips now, curious, but didn't move. Instead, she stood up and walked to the observation window. My people, she said, would find this primitive. They say pleasure is distraction. Emotions are chemical noise. Jackson stood too, slowly. Do you believe that? She didn't answer, but her hands tightened at her sides. Later that night, Valona lay in her private sleeping chamber. The room was dark, but her mind was full of light. She dreamed for the first time in years. She dreamed she saw Jackson smiling, reaching out not to take, but to offer. In the dream, she kissed him, and it felt like stars exploded. Behind her eyes, she woke up sweating, breathing fast. She placed her hand on her lips, confused. What was happening to her? The next day, she avoided him. She told the assistant to cancel all meetings. She needed time to think, to stop this dangerous curiosity, but it was too late. The door was already open. She walked through the garden dome on her ship. Plants from dozens of alien worlds grew here, but none of them felt alive to her anymore. Not like Jackson, she whispered to herself. Why him? Her assistant watched from the security chamber. Eyes narrowing, Commander Valona had changed. She spoke to herself now. She smiled when reading human logs. This was not the Valona they knew, and they sent another warning to the High Command. The subject is compromising the commander's purity. Prepare intervention. Meanwhile, Jackson received a private message from Valona, short and strange. Meet me in the learning hall. Midnight cycle. Come alone. He went, curious and a little nervous. She stood there waiting, not in armor, not in uniform, but in soft robes, her long silver hair down, glowing faintly in the dim lights. He stopped in place, stunned. Wow, you look different. I feel different, she said quietly. She walked closer, stopping just one step away. Jackson. What happens if I want something not allowed? You ask yourself? It's worth the risk, he said. She nodded once, then slowly raised her hand and placed it on his chest. She could feel his heart, beating strong and steady. Then I want, she whispered. But before she could lean, an alarm sounded across the ship. Red lights flashed. A voice shouted. Commander Velena, step away from the human. Emotional breach detected. Doors locked. Guards appeared. Velena didn't move. She kept her hand on Jackson's chest, her voice calm. I am not broken. I am awake. But the choice was no longer hers. Guards seized her and Jackson both. Her assistant watched silently. One word echoed through the chamber. Forbidden. Velena sat alone in the holding room. No windows, no sound. Just cold walls. Her wrists were locked in energy cuffs, glowing blue. The cuffs didn't hurt, but they were a message. She had crossed the line. Outside, her ship floated silently. Above Earth's orbit, the crew had been told she was undergoing mental stabilization. But whispers spread like smoke. The commander has fallen, they said. She let the human inside her mind. Jackson, too, was detained in a separate room. No cuffs, but locked doors. He paced slowly, his jaw tight. He didn't know what would happen now. He only knew one thing: Velena had tried to reach out to him, not with orders, not as a soldier, but as someone searching for meaning, and they had punished her for it inside her mind. Velena fought with two voices. One told her to abate, to erase, to forget, to return to the cold. The other whispered softly Jackson's voice. Tenderness is not weakness. Feeling is not failure. Suddenly, the door hissed open. An elder officer stepped inside. His eyes sharp and unforgiving. You have failed your directive, he said. Velena didn't answer. You were not chosen to explore emotions, he continued. You were chosen to collect genetic data, perform a single reproduction event, and return. Still, she said nothing. Her eyes stared past him, like he was already part of a world she was leaving behind. You are to be sent back, he said finally. You will undergo memory cleansing and be reassigned. That made her look up. Erase what? She asked calmly. Everything, the elder said. The human, your logs, your new thoughts. You will return to standard function. Velena's voice turned cold. I do not consent. The elder laughed quietly. You are a tool, Commander, not a person. She looked him in the eye and spoke clearly. Then this tool is broken. Purpose. Across the ship, Jackson found his door unlocked. No guards, no warnings. A young alien officer appeared, eyes wide with fear, but voice steady. I watched her sessions. The young one said, she is right. We've been told to kill a part of ourselves since birth. Jackson stepped forward. Where is she? Follow me, the young officer said, but hurry once they start the cleansing process. There's no going back in the main. Chamber. Velena was strapped to a chair. A machine above her began to glow. Final check. Subject heart rate rising. Brainwave activity unstable, a voice said. Begin cleanse, came the order. But before the light could enter her mind, a loud crash echoed through the control center. Jackson burst through the side door, eyes burning with anger. He tackled one of the technicians and grabbed the memory control unit. Stop the process, he shouted. The machine sparked and powered down. Guards moved fast, but not fast enough. The young officer who had helped Jackson ran in, weapon drawn. We're not doing this anymore, he shouted. Let her choose. Velena looked up. Her vision still blurry. She saw Jackson standing in front of her, shielding her with his own body. She whispered, you came back, he smiled. You didn't say goodbye properly. Another alarm sounded. High Command had been alerted. A strike order was already preparing if they couldn't control her. They would destroy her ship to protect their system. Velena knew what that meant. She stood slowly, her hands shaking but her eyes clear. She turned to the crew members still loyal to her. This is not treason, she said. This is truth. We've been lied to. It's quitting, and I will not return to the cold. Some stepped back in fear, but others, young, confused, Hopeful nodded. She wasn't just a commander anymore. She was a symbol. She walked to the command deck and opened a universal signal channel. Her voice echoed across nearby systems. I am Valana of the Arkle, and I declare myself free. I reject the idea that emotion is weakness. I reject the idea that connection is failure. I have met a human, and through him, I found something greater than duty. I found choice. Earth stations received the message with wide eyes. The Galactic Council paused their meetings and back on the ship. Jackson stood beside her, not as a prisoner, but as a partner. Outside, warships began to move into position. Valona knew what was coming, but she didn't run. She took Jackson's hand, finally. A touch that meant something real, and said, if I fall today, at least I fall awake. The stars outside were calm, but inside the ship, everything burned. Valona had broken every law of her people. Jackson had become more than a guest. He was now her shield, her storm, her mirror. But now they were fugitives. The cleansing order had failed, but the sentence remained: death or exile. The crew was divided. Some had joined her. Young minds hungry for feeling, others remained loyal to high command, silently reporting everything. The ship drifted near Earth's orbit. Power low, escape impossible. They were trapped between two worlds, one that feared feeling, and one that taught her how to feel. That night, in her private chamber, Valana stood by the window. The earth below glowed blue and warm. Jackson stepped beside her. His voice soft. You've been quiet. I'm calculating how long we have left, she whispered. Can't you just rest? He asked. She turned to him slowly. I don't know how. Jackson walked over and picked up her old armor from the floor. You used to wear this like a second skin, he said. Now it just looks empty. It is, she replied. It was never me. Just what I was told to be. She sat down slowly, looking tired, not physically, but inside. Her voice shook as she asked, Jackson, do you think I'm broken? He crouched in front of her. No, I think you're blooming. She blinked, surprised. Blooming. Yeah, he smiled, like a flower. You don't look like the others anymore because you're finally alive. Valona looked at her hands. They once delivered orders, commands, punishments. Now they trembled. Not with fear, but with something she never thought she'd feel: longing. She whispered, Then show me. Jackson tilted his head. Show you what? Her voice became fragile. Show me what it means to feel. He didn't move fast. He sat beside her, not touching, just close, and began talking not about war, not about rules, but about memories. He told her how his mother used to braid his hair when he was young, how his father cried the first time Jackson left for space. He told her how a sunset once made him cry, and how laughter saved him from giving up during war. Valona listened like every word was sacred. These stories weren't just human, they were real. They were scars and light mixed together. When Jackson finally took her hand, it wasn't to lead her. It was to let her choose feelings. Aren't clean, he said. They're messy, sharp, and wild, but that's what makes them beautiful. Valana slowly leaned her head onto his shoulder. Her body relaxed for the first time in years. Not because she was safe, but because she was no longer alone. The silence between them wasn't cold anymore. It was full of unspoken trust. Later, she opened her journal, the one she kept hidden from her people, and wrote, He did not teach me with actions. He taught me with stillness. His heart beats loud even when his mouth is quiet. I am not empty. I am just learning a new shape, but outside the door, trouble brewed again. One of the loyal crew members had sent coordinates to the Arkle High Fleet. A destroyer ship was now on its way, powerful enough to erase her entire vessel in one blast. No warnings, no second chances. The young officer who had once helped Jackson burst into Vallona's chamber. Panting, "They're coming," she said. "We have less than one cycle." Vallona stood up, her soft expression replaced by determination. "They want to erase me," she said, "but they can't erase what I've learned." She turned to Jackson. "Will you stand with me?" He nodded without hesitation, to the end. That night, Vallona sent out a final broadcast. She didn't beg, didn't apologize. She spoke the truth. "I was made for function," she said. "But I found something better, something warmer meaning. They may kill me, but they cannot unfeel what I've awakened in others." Her signal reached far, across ships, planets, minds. Some shut it off, others listened. In the silence that followed, Vallona and Jackson stood on the bridge. Hand in hand, he had not kissed her, not yet, but she knew what it would feel like now. Not fire, but light. And just before the enemy ship arrived, she whispered, "One more time, thank you for teaching me to feel." They came without warning. The Arkle High Fleet, tall black warships shaped like claws, fell into orbit like shadows swallowing light. No greetings, no questions, no diplomacy, just a single command echoing across all channels: surrender the defect, purge the data, prepare for destruction. Vallona stood on the bridge of her ship, calm but not cold. Her hand gripped Jackson's. Not as a sign of fear, but of choice. She looked at the angry light of the enemy ships and whispered, "They called me a leader when I was blind. Now they call me broken because I see." Her crew was torn. Some officers stood frozen, old rules locked in their minds. Others, young, curious, changed, stood behind her, silent but firm. They had heard her words, felt her truth. She wasn't just their commander now, she was their rebellion. The transmission buzzed again, a voice from high command, cold as ice. "Vallona, you have been identified as emotionally compromised. You will surrender yourself for cleansing, or your ship will be dismantled atom by atom." Vallona stepped forward and spoke back. "My body may be yours, but my soul is mine, and it no longer fits in your cage." Jackson turned to her. "We need a plan." She nodded. "We can't outrun them. We can reach others." She opened a wide range, come, not to fight, but to speak, broadcasting to every nearby system. She said, "My name is Vallona, and I was once loyal. I followed orders, I buried emotions, I treated life like a task. Then I met a human, and he showed me the difference between existing and feeling. If I am defective, then let every heart listening know, this defect can love, and I will not hide it anymore." The words flew through space like wildfire. Some ships shut off their coms in disgust. Others hesitated. One ship, a scout vessel from a distant colony, replied, "We hear you, Commander, and you are not alone." High Command panicked. Messages were intercepted. Junior officers began whispering. An emotional infection had begun to spread. Not a virus of flesh, but a feeling. Back on Vallona's ship, Jackson stood at her side. "This wasn't your plan," he said. She looked at him, her voice soft. "No, it was my awakening." Then came the final strike order. A high-yield plasma charge was launched toward her vessel. But something unexpected happened. One of the escort ships from the Arkle fleet turned and shot it down. Silence. Then another ship powered down its weapons. Then another. Vallona's voice returned to the comms. To the officers still listening. "They may call us broken, but maybe it's the system that's cracked." On Earth, human diplomats watched in awe. This was no longer a cultural exchange. This was the start of a revolution. Later, back in her quarters, Vallona sat quietly. Her hands were shaking, not from fear, but from the weight of what she had become. She looked at Jackson. "Do you think they'll ever accept me?" He touched her face gently. "I don't know, but I do." She rested her forehead against his. No barriers, no orders, no experiments, just closeness. warm and real. Later, she stood in front of a mirror. She wore no armor, no rank pins, no mask, just herself, and for the first time, she didn't feel wrong. She didn't feel defective. She felt free. She opened her journal one last time and wrote, "They said I was dangerous, but I only held a mirror. And now? They see what they fear, that we are not empty inside. We are just waiting to feel." She signed her name, not with a title, just Valena. And beside it, she wrote a second name, not for ownership, but for memory. Jackson outside the fleet remained quiet, but among the stars, something had shifted. A command had been challenged, and an entire species had heard a new word rise in the darkness: hope. The HFY fleet never fired again. They didn't surrender, but they didn't pursue either. They drifted away like ghosts, unable to accept what they had seen. Unwilling to admit they had lost not to war, but to change, Valena stood on the bridge, watching them disappear into the stars. Jackson stepped beside her, silent, steady. "Is it over?" he asked. She shook her head gently. "No, change doesn't come from silence. It grows." When people dare to live out loud, months passed. Valena didn't return to her people. They had erased her name from records, declared her void. But she didn't care, because now she had something they couldn't erase. She lived on Earth now, not in military quarters or research stations, but in a small home by the sea. Waves rolled in each morning like soft breath. The sky above was blue, wide, and free. Jackson planted a garden behind the house. Valena watched it grow each day. "Why do you tend it by hand?" she once asked. "Because it feels better when you care for something slowly." He said she didn't fully understand at first, but she liked watching his fingers in the soil. It reminded her that life wasn't always about speed or control. Sometimes it was about presence. One day, a child approached their home, not human, not fully. She had the soft lilac skin of the Arkle and the wild green eyes of Earth. Valena opened the door slowly, unsure. The child held out a message. "Disc. My mother told me to find you," she said. "She said you would understand." Inside the message was a voice, another Arkle female, younger, uncertain, but brave. "Commander Valena, I heard your words before they were erased. I didn't believe them at first. But then I started to feel, and now I can't go back. I'm raising my daughter outside the system because I want her to live, not just function." Valena sat down slowly, her hand on her chest. Jackson didn't speak. He only placed his arm around her shoulder. No words were needed. Because she knew now this was the legacy she was building. She wasn't a warrior anymore. She was something deeper, a seed in the galaxy, and others were beginning to bloom. Years passed. Valena began teaching quietly at first. She gave lectures not about tactics, but about touch, not about protocol, but about pleasure. Not the shallow kind her people had once feared, but the kind that makes hearts grow warm and eyes light up. Her students came from everywhere: aliens, humans, hybrids. They didn't want orders. They wanted truth, and Valena gave it to them. She told them how the human made her laugh before he touched her, how he asked her questions before he ever reached for her hand, how his presence made her feel real. She told them that is what pleasure is, not fire, not command, but peace in another's eyes. She and Jackson never married. They didn't need to. They chose each other every day. That was enough. And when they grew older, when her skin turned a softer silver and his hair turned gray, they would sit by the sea and watch the sun set together, not as a ritual, but as a shared breath. One evening, as the sky turned gold, Jackson handed her a small necklace, simple glass pendant. Inside it, pressed carefully, was the first flower he had given her long ago. Valena touched it gently. "You kept it." "I never let it go," he said. She smiled softly, the same way she once had long ago in that cold chamber. "But now?" Her smile was full, warm, true. She wore the pendant every day after that. Not to remember where she came from, but to honor what she had chosen. Because in the end, Valona didn't choose exile. She didn't choose rebellion. She didn't even choose freedom. She chose pleasure. The kind that fills you slowly, like light through a window. The kind that says, you are not just living. You are alive.